So Scott, we have been introduced to MVC, but what we basically did was learn the guts of what makes MVC.
Yep.
So the next step would logically be kind of building our very first application. So when I think of building a web application, I think of some sort of form, of taking in some sort of information and displaying it back to me.
Some kind of CRUD.
Yes.
Create, read, update, delete.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll try to do something basic like that, because so far we started kind of at a basic Hello World app, which would be a .NET Core app.
Yep.
Learned a little bit about how .NET Core fit together. And then we used ASP.NET Core at the low level to say Hello World. We layered on top of that middleware and routing, talked about Kestrel and IIS, then eventually saw MVC, but we had built all that up from one tiny basic app.
Yeah.
We should just start from this default template.
So we did all that, and now we're throwing it all away.
This is how computers work, though, right? Because each additional layer of abstraction is indistinguishable from magic.
All right, so let's go and see how we can do this.
Okay, so we'll be in Visual Studio Community. Again, we're doing everything in this MVA with free versions.
Yep.
So .NET is free and open source, Visual Studio Code is free and open source, and Visual Studio Community, go to visualstudio.com/free, also free.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to say new project, and I'm going to say ASP.NET Core Web Application.
All right.
Hit OK. Before, you had me make an empty one.
Yes, I did.
I'm going to go a little farther and I'll make a web application. And I'm going to have this web application have some authentication. This means that individual users could have accounts.
So we could add things to this, like?
Well, not just that. It's not just adding stuff to a database, but it's actually individual people could log in. So when we authenticate, is it an anonymous database? Is it an anonymous website where anyone can log in? Or is it people who can log in with their work account or Azure account or their Windows account? We're going to make it so you could potentially log into this as Scott or as Maria.
Okay, so you could add things like Facebook and Twitter and Google.
Yeah, we could extend that and absolutely have other providers, totally. Okay, hit OK. All right, so by default, we're going to get this nice welcome here. And within this, you've got how-tos that you can go and follow along. So a lot of the things that we're using to talk today, you have available to you. You can go and explore these things. This is just a project README. It's an HTML file that's sitting in the root of the application. So if you want to get that back, that's sitting right there. And you see the packages are restoring. See?
So that's the .NET Restore?
Yep, .NET Restore is running. This one had a little bit more stuff.
That's a lot of stuff.
Well, because it's got all that MVC stuff that we would need, and they've preset up some basics. So this is really kind of cool, actually.
Oh, that's really cool. So what are some of these basics in here?
Well, let's run it and see what it looks like, and then we'll talk about those. So I'm going to hit Control F5. I like to hit Control F5 rather than hitting the debug button, because if I'm not debugging, it's a little bit faster to start up.
That's something I'm trying to get into, but I usually just hit play.
Yeah, it does. It's a little bit faster if you do it this way.
Well, that's actually the nicest looking thing we've looked at this.
This is, given that we've been just saying, hello, hey, what's up, how's it going? Yeah, this is actually quite a bit nicer. This is using Bootstrap.
So it's using a Bootstrap template, so I can go add Bootstrap stuff to this.
Right, so Bootstrap is CSS and JavaScript from Twitter that makes for nice looking and what they call responsive design. So if I went like this, it's a little mobile site as well.
That's neat.
Okay, so that comes out of the box, and then we've got this kind of, what do you call this, a carousel.
Yes, a carousel.
The hero at the top there. And then I can click register, and we could go and make new accounts. That was the individual user account registration.
So that's what just happened. Okay.
Yep. This was all kind of created for us. Let's take a look at startup.cs.
That's a pretty chunky one.
It's got a lot going on there, so let's just explore for a minute. So remember last time when we had appsettings.json, here we've got some additional options like reload on change. That means you could actually change your config.
Oh, okay.
It'll get noticed.
And they'll just reload?
And you don't have to go and reload your application we will reload the configuration for you.
So what's the next one telling us?
So this is kind of a combination. Remember that we spent time looking at environment names.
Yeah.
And then after that, looked at configuration. This is saying that look here for application settings. And then when you're done looking here, look for additional application settings here. So it would be app settings dot production dot JSON.
Okay.
So you could have environment specific app settings. Cool, eh?
That's pretty cool.
There's some configuration stuff, like where are you going to get the SQL database connections? We're getting that from configuration. Then we've got add services. We'll talk more about dependency injection tomorrow, but suffice it to say, this application can send email and texts.
So this is dependent, but what I'm looking at right now is dependency.
Right. This is the setting up of services. We're basically letting the system know that there will be a way to send email, there'll be a way to send text messages. It's handled in this class. And, you know, hey, if anybody goes looking for an iEmail sender, that's
where it is. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Now down here.
So down here, I see a couple of new things, 2 new things, actually. So we have the app database error page.
Yep, that's new. So the developer exception page and then extended with database information.
Okay.
Thing called browser link, which is a debugging tool that we'll use a little bit later. And then if you're not in development, remember before we were just getting 404s and 500s and stuff? You can actually say, I want this page to handle my errors for me.
That's
so
nice.
If the 500 happens in production, give them a friendly error.
Oh, something nice like,
right.
Sorry,
and
check back soon.
Maybe log it. And then there's that default route right there.
There it is.
And then use static files, and then use identity. That's the middleware for the authentication of the user's name, Scott or Maria or whoever. Okay. And then you see here it says add external authentication below. So if someone wanted to go and do Twitter or Facebook,
you could do it this way.
You could do it that way.
Okay, cool.
Okay. But if we look at the Solution Explorer, we've got our CSS and JavaScript in www.root. So this is your Bootstrap and your site CSS. We've got a couple of controllers. We'll go looking at those in a little bit. Data, you'll have a whole section on Entity Framework and how data works soon.
Okay.
A couple of models for managing users' accounts. This is a nice sample to explore. It's a little complicated, but it's pretty cool. The thing that sends messages, all right, email and SMS.
So are these different services?
Exactly. These services here are services to provide the ability to send email or send SMSs or text messages.
So I could add Twilio in here and SendGrid and all those sweet things.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Like I think, in fact, plug in your SMS service here to send a text message. That's where your Twilio goes in there, or whatever you decide to use for sending your text messages. And then we've got all the views to manage accounts. You see there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Log in, log out, forgot my password. You know, life's complicated. And then verify phone numbers for 2-factor auth. Pretty cool and pretty sophisticated.
And this is all already wired up for you.
Already wired up. So your basic application already does quite a bit. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a new model, because we'll make a list of, we'll say, movies. Okay? So I'm going to right-click here and add a class. Okay? And we will add a movie class. And notice that it's in the models namespace because it happened to be where I right-clicked.
So it automatically detected that.
Because I right-clicked on models, it assumed that that's what I wanted my namespace to be. If I'd clicked controllers, it would have been
controllers. Okay.
Okay, so let's go and say that movies have an ID, and they have a title.
They have some sort of genre.
Yeah, and they have a release date. Genre. And let's say that they have a price. That looks like movies. That looks like a movie right there. That's just the description of what a movie is. All right?
Yeah, that seems fair enough.
Okay.
We're missing a rating, but yeah.
Yep, that's true. Could add ratings, then I'd need an enumeration and it would get more complicated, but you're right. Now, because I'm going to put this in the database, that ID is kind of unique. It's going to be some number that's going to be unique to the movies. It's different from the title because there's like 2 Ghostbusters movies. They're going to have different IDs, okay? And let's go and do a build to make sure I haven't broken anything yet. It is certainly possible. What we don't have is any kind of movie controller.
So it has to match up.
It would be nice if it matched up. I don't necessarily have to have it match up, but I know that movies are going to need their own section of the website. So I'm going to say add controller. You see how this appears here?
Yeah.
This is a scaffolding system. This is kind of cool. This will look at the movies object and then generate a controller for it and a whole series of views.
Oh, okay.
Remember we said we wanted CRUD.
Yeah. So, it needs one to create.
Create, read, update, delete, and it will generate them all. So what I'm going to do is I could say MVC controller with create, read, update, delete.
Oh, okay. So you can. This is all part of the scaffolding process.
It's all part of scaffolding. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try this one that says MVC controller with views using the entity framework. This one says make actions for create and et cetera, et cetera. This one says make actions for create using the entity framework database system. This is the ORM, or the Object Relational Mapper.
Okay.
All right. So let's double click on that. And we're going to get this folder here. Okay. So here we're going to pick our movie. That's our model. And we'll pick our application's database context. That's the thing it's been using to talk to databases.
Okay.
We're going to say generate views and whatever scripts that are necessary, and we'll call it the movies controller. Now, if I had a layout page, that would be like, remember that larger layout frame that had like my header and my footer?
Yeah.
I could use that.
That as well? Okay.
But I'm not going to use that in this case.
So when you hit this right now, will it generate all the views for you?
It will generate at least 4 or 5 views, and it will generate the controller.
Okay.
So we should actually see it happen on the right-hand side when we hit add. So
let's pay attention.
Cross our fingers and see what happens. So it's movies controller just showed up.
And then let's look in the views.
Oops. So movies just showed up. Movies controller just showed up. Create, delete, details, edit, and index just showed up.
Okay.
So I think we're going to need to explore those. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work quite yet, but it does mean that we got a little bit of getting started code.
Yeah, something that we don't have to write from the ground up.
And this is the thing. We could have written that ourselves. No fun. All right, let's see what we got here. So knowing what we know about the now legendary Scott controller and Maria controller.
Yes.
What do we have? We've got a movies controller. So what's the URL going to be if we use the default route?
For the movies controller? Isn't it going to be movies?
Yep, /movies. And that means that index would be the default.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We've got this database context that's being automatically created or newed up. It's being made for us with dependency injection.
Okay, so that's another example of dependency injection.
Yep, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But the point is that we notice that nowhere do we say new DB context. It's happened for us. It's a service.
Okay, it's one of the services. Okay. So we have the underscore context equals context. What does that mean?
That's an interesting one. So here is a private property. And one of the conventions that people sometimes use is they'll put an underscore in front of the variable name to say it's private.
Okay, so that's just an way of indicating that this is private.
Everyone's different. It's not required. You could actually say context equals context, but it can be a little confusing. Sometimes people might say like an abbreviation, and they'll call it like context in. But the point is that the context that was passed in, we have a moment in time that we can save it.
Okay.
We're going to grab that. All right. This is kind of convenient to put your URLs at the top there, just to get a general idea of like what exactly does this do? Oh yeah, it is a get for /movies. Okay, and this is going to go and return a view. But notice that this context, that's the database context, is going to say, go and get the movies and put them into a list.
So we'll just list out all the movies that we have available.
Now, this could have been written in the old days for people who are maybe a little bit familiar with asp.net. You might have seen something like this. So a couple things here. I'm doing it on 2 lines. I'm saying go to the database, grab the movies, turn them into a list. That'll be in here, and then pass that list off to the view. But a few things have changed. First, of course, it's on 1 line just because we like things tidy. But we're saying we want to do this asynchronously, and all that means is if it's going to take a long time to talk to the database, just tell us when you're done, database. Yeah. We're going to go over here and keep working. Oh, you're done? Now we're ready for you. Okay. Basically, we're going to try to be as non-blocking as possible.
Okay.
All right? So we go and we get that movie, and then that gets returned. The movie list goes to the index view. So if we go back to our friend here, think about this in the context of movies.
Okay.
All right? So she goes and she hits /movies. The movies controller gets created. It goes to the database. It's called a database context. We'll learn about that. And it gets a list of movies. List of movie. That list of movies gets passed into the view. In this case, I think it was called the index view.
Okay, and then
HTML gets made.
And that is presented to her.
That is the response that comes back to the web browser. So let's take a moment then and look at movies index. It's a table row. We've got the display names for genre, price, release, etc. And then that's really all it is. Look at that.
That's it.
For each item in model. And what is model? Let's zoom in on that. It is an enumerable list of movies. Enumerable means you can go forward over it one time.
Okay.
You don't get to seek around, go forward and backwards. You can enumerate it once. It's not a formal list. And that's set right there. Remember before when we said model, passed in a Scott view model or whatever? Here we're passing in a list of movies. And then for each of those movies, at the very end, we have edit, details, and delete that are going to appear. And this is actually called a tag helper, and we're going to do a separate section on that. But suffice it to say, these are links to go and edit, check the details, or delete an individual movie. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Let's break some stuff.
All right, so let's go and see what it looks like.
Oh,
it's not going to work?
There's no chance it'll work.
Never know.
It could work.
Probably
There's always something small, but it's fun. It's better that it not work, because then we will learn something. Thinking? All right, let's look at this.
So
it says, cannot open the database requested by the login. It says that there's no database here, so it doesn't have this concept of a movie, right? And I can try to ask it to do that, but probably not going to work. Let's check it out. Entity Framework, when we get into the more detailed stuff, lets you take that description of movies.
Yeah.
And it says, oh, a movie has an ID and a genre and a date and all those things. That's going to be a table in the database with these columns.
So Entity Framework allows you to do that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So what it's doing here, has it scaffolded that for us?
It's going to scaffold what's called a migration. And we're going to go and stop IIS Express. And we only have to do this one time to unload our application. All right. And we're going to go into this folder here. So I'm just going to take the path that we're in here, and I'm going to go to the command prompt, cd, and then paste that in. There's our application. All right. And we are going to say .NET, right? Remember the .NET command line. And we can do this in Visual Studio, but I'd like to see this here. We're going to say .NET. And remember how we talked about the different kinds of tools that there are?
So do we have an entity framework tool?
We do have an entity framework tool. Excellent. We have .NET EF.
Oh, but we didn't need to add it to the tools section this time.
Ooh, that's a great point. Let's find out. Did we? So here's our dependencies, blah, blah, blah. Tools. All right.
There it is, entity frameworks tools.
So that's a tool. Secrets management is a tool. The code generator is a tool. So we have an entity framework tool. So I'm going to say .NET EF migrations, and this is all in the docs. I'm going to add an initial migration. So basically I'm going to say make a table called movies. That's the idea here. And then I'm going to say .NET EF database update. All right. So at this point, we should have a database that has movies, at least as a table.
Can we see it here?
We will go and run the app, and we will see the list of the data in the database. And we should be able to see where it's located.
Yeah. Would it be under data?
It is in, is it in data? No. That is the migration.
Okay.
This is the thing, we'll talk about this tomorrow, but that's the initial creation of that database. This is the description of how to make the tables. So here it says create a movie table and ID and genre. And we'll have Rowan Miller from the Entity Framework team come and chat with us about that.
That would be a very good one.
Mm-hmm. And in the app settings, we have our database connection string right there.
So if I was connecting to an external database,
then your connection string goes right there. And again, you might have app settings dot development or app settings dot production.
Okay.
Okay, so right now this is for development, so we're just using a local database, but I might put that in Azure at some point in the future. Okay. So let's hit /movies, see what that looks like. All right.
Oh,
so we didn't get an error.
We didn't.
So that's a good sign. So let's say create new. And I want to point this out. This is really significant. Movie/create, we just did a get, right?
Yeah.
HTTP get. We got this form here. Okay, it's a good looking form. Worked out pretty nicely. Let's look at what that code looks like. That is down here.
In the create.razor, right?
Yep, so the create.cshtml,
which is a
razor page. So here.
Oh, so all the stuff in purple, is that razor?
Everything on the page is razor, and these are razor tag helpers.
So those are tag helpers.
And we'll talk about those. So watch for razor tag helpers. But watch happens if I remove that. See how form is now just a regular looking maroon color? Yeah. As soon as I say ASP:\action, that's not HTML. That's a tag helper. This form, when we render that, is actually going to say form action equals post, or method equals post action /movies/create. Here's the thing. I could write these forms myself. I could do this. Kind of sucks. But what if I decided to change that URL?
Then you have to manually go in and do it.
I would have to go and do it here and everywhere else.
So the best way would be what we had previously.
Mm-hmm. And additionally, where do you think it's going to get that URL from? Where do we have a list of all the routes that could potentially happen, right? The routing table goes both ways.
Okay.
So you can say to ASP.NET Core, the movies controller has a method called create. What's the URL for that? And then it will generate that URL for you.
All right.
So you don't have to think about URLs. And if you decide to change movies to films,
you still don't need to think about
it in one place
versus having to boot it every single place in your code.
Exactly. Okay. So here we are saying, give me an input for the title of the movie and give me an input for the release date. And I'm not having to say anything about whether it's a date or whether it's an integer. Notice that there's nothing about decimals or not. asp.net is going to automatically take each of these purple controls and do the right thing. And we'll see that when we do a view source. Okay. So when I type something in,
That's a really cheap movie.
it's pretty cheap, sorry. I hit create. Now we're on the list here. That seemed very simple.
It did.
But in fact, there was a thing that happened there that was called PostRedirect Get, or PRG.
And how would I see that those parts come together?
I'll show you. And before I do that, let me show you PostRedirect Get. See, it is a web development design pattern that tries to prevent duplicate form submissions. Have you ever been in a situation where you were browsing the web, you fill out a form, and then you hit back?
Yes.
And you get this warning, like, you don't want to do that. We're gonna post it again. And you're like, I don't want to get charged twice.
Yep.
PostRedirect Get tries to support bookmarks and refreshing in a way that doesn't cause duplicates. It's trying to prevent duplicates. It's a specific technique for this. So let's walk through that and try to, like you said, maybe visualize it.
Visualize how it works, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to hit Create New again. And in the browser here, I'm going to go to the F12 Developer Tools. That's going to pop up at the bottom. Now I'm using Edge, but you're welcome to use Firefox or Chrome or whatever makes you happy. Okay? And we'll filter this because I don't want to see all this CSS.
No.
I'm just going to see documents.
Okay.
All right. That's
So we're going to restart the page and see what happens?
And then I'm going to click here where it says Clear Entries on Navigate. I don't want that. I want navigations to not clear this list. So let's go and fill something out again. Title, Shawshank Redemption. You seen the Shawshank Redemption?
Yeah.
It's a classic.
It's a great movie. It's an amazing book.
It is. That's there's like a channel on cable that's just the Shawshank Redemption.
Like what? Playing again and again and again.
TNT, it's always on. Okay, so I'm going to hit create and watch what happens.
Okay.
I think I needed to, I think I maybe made my filter too much. Let me try again. I want to say other and documents and try that again. Because I want to see everything.
Back to the Future.
Oh, Ghostbusters 2. I could do this all day. There we go.
Okay, what's happening?
There we go. All right. What happened here?
So we have a movie that was a get.
We had the movie create form. The empty form was a get. That was here. So we got that form.
And says, okay, we're good to go.
Yeah. So then we filled it out and we did a post. That was with the contents of the form. And we can go back over here.
And can you see what was in that? There it is.
Right. So this is how stuff is passed. Notice how I passed in Ghostbusters space 2, but it gets encoded, so it's Ghostbusters plus 2. The slash becomes a %2f. You don't need to think about those things, but it's good to know that things get encoded on the way back. So all of that got sent back to MVC, and it got sent to the movies controller to create. Here's where it's significant, though. We were already on create. So how do we call create twice? Once as a get and once as a post. Gets and posts can be treated differently. So here's the get for create. Look how simple it is. It just returns that empty form that you have to fill out.
That's all it does.
That's all it has to do is an empty form. It doesn't even have to go to the database. Right? Then we say here,
here's the post, right?
Yeah, and notice that it is also named create. It's an overload.
Okay.
So posts go here.
And then there's some sort of binding that happens.
So we want to get a movie from the form post. So remember what was passed in. Name value pairs, right? Okay. So we want to say, hey, go and get the name value pairs, make me a movie, and bind genre, price, back and forth.
And is this what we call data? No. Is this what we call data binding?
Model binding.
Model binding, yes.
Exactly. This used to suck.
What did you used to do?
var x equals new movie, movie.title equals request.form title, movie.price equals request.form, and then you had to get that and convert it to a decimal and make sure it was really a decimal. You know what I mean? It was, we call left hand, right hand.
So you're passing from side to side.
And imagine, this is only an object with 5.
So if it was millions,
well, I don't know about millions, but order details could be hundreds of somethings, right?
What about banks?
And for loops inside of things, thinking about secure, like you said, banks, secure data, it gets complicated really, really fast. So model binding can take an object and make one. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here, and we'll actually do this again really quickly and watch it happen and keep going through the PostRedirect Get. Okay? So here we go. I'm going to bring this up. Developer Tools / movies. Oops. / movies. All right. So I'm going to clear this.
And then
create new. You said Back to the Future.
Yeah. Best movie ever made.
Is it?
Yep.
Okay. Create. Now we're broken. That doesn't mean that we're busted. That just means that we're stopped. So what do we do?
So can I look in there and see what's coming back?
So let's look at movie. I can actually push these little push pins.
That's pretty cool.
And I'm going to put them off right there.
So this is telling you everything that we've got back.
No, interesting. So this is not showing everything that we got back. It's showing everything that ended up in movie. We could look at the request object if there was other stuff.
Okay.
So people can do what are called over posts, where they are being sneaky and they go into the developer tools and they add additional stuff. They could say movie.discounted price and try to send us evil.
Oh, like the spam?
Yeah, or they could try to lower the price. People will go and do over posts and try to lower the price of objects in their shopping cart. But that's why we said bind. We're only looking at those 5 things. Other things that got passed in would be completely ignored.
Okay, so if someone tried to hack or sneak the system.
If we do it right, then theoretically they would have a harder time. Additionally, because I'm at a breakpoint here, I could even change things and lie and say that Back to the Future is a drama.
So if we continued.
So let's continue. I'm going to use F10. The model state is valid. So now we're going to add this movie to the database. Save that. That was post. What's next? Redirect. So it's going to redirect to the index action. Notice that it doesn't say redirect / movies.
No, it just redirects it over.
No, but it redirects to /index, which pulls out of the routing table. Remember how the routing table knows where the URLs are?
Yes. So if we go back to those, we will see it change to drama.
In this case here, oh, it looks like I took too long. Let's see if that worked. I either crashed it or it ran too long. Let's try and see if I actually made it. Did we make Back to the Future? We did. Sometimes if you sit in a breakpoint for too long, it will eventually get tired of waiting for you. And
it'll be like, bye.
It's like, forget you. So PostRedirect Get, let me turn off this breakpoint here. I'll show you this again. Create new. there's a thing called RoboForm that you can get that will fill out these forms for you if this eventually gets boring. And of course, you can do automated testing as well. I'm running out of movies. All right, let's do our filter now. Post to create, do the redirect back to movies, which then does a get. So it's post, redirect, get. The result is that you have a nice, clean push create, type something, you show up right back here.
Without having to see something else.
Without having, and if I notice I can back up and it's not saying.
It's not giving you that,
oh, I'm going to post
what
it
are you
again.
doing?
Exactly. And if I hover over these details, now I'm going to hover here, look in the lower left corner. It's a little small, I'm afraid. Let me see if I can make it easier for folks that are watching this from home. Lower left corner here, watch right down here. Details /3. Details
so it's giving me
/4.
its ID?
Exactly. So remember what the index page looked like. Details, that's the action. So it's movie details with the route ID of ID. We could have written that ourselves. We could have written out like a string, like /movie /details /quote ID. But again, we might want to change it to films another day, right?
Projects evolve over time.
Projects evolve, so you don't want to lock down your URL. So here is, where's our details? Where's the details? Details. There we go. Look how nice and clean this is. So, details, passing in an integer. Is it null? Not found. What's a not found?
404.
It's a 404. So you don't have to write 404 even.
It's just not found. So that is that like, do we have a whole bunch of stuff for that, for like other stuff?
In fact, good call. There's redirect, and there's redirect permanent, and there's not found, and there's like server error and all this crap.
So we don't need, you
don't have to know the numbers. You know that they exist, but you don't have to hard code the number. So then we go and we say, hey, database context, go and get a single movie with the ID of ID. Did that work? No, not found. So there's two reasons it could be not found. Otherwise, we pass into the view and we get the movie. So this means we can go over here and say details. There's 2. I can hack the URL.
4 and it should change.
Yeah, there you go.
But if you put like 10.
Yeah, good point. That 404 happened explicitly because of that not coming back from the database.
Okay.
Make sense?
Makes sense.
It's pretty clean. So one thing that is interesting is the way that I've been passing in dates has been a little bit what they call ethnocentric, a little bit American.
Very American.
You may not appreciate this here because there's my birthday, right? Is my birthday 1/22 or is it 22/1? You all like to do day, month. You think like this?
I think like that. The right way.
There's no 22nd month. That makes no sense. Let's take a look at that. All right? Not going to let me do that.
Because it just doesn't understand the date.
It knows that that's a wrong date, and it doesn't like that idea.
So how can I change it to work for different things?
So you can express more about a particular data type by going back to the original model. So let's go back to movie. See where it says release date?
Yeah.
And you know how we put attributes on controllers for things like the routing table? You give a hint. That's what an attribute is. I could say display format. This is called a data annotation. I'm going to say a data format string. And we're going to tell it exactly how we want it to be. And we'll say year, year, month, month, day, day.
Then you have.
All right. So you would basically say this is the only way that dates are, and however you'd want, however your country or your company wants it.
But you could also, could you apply different options?
You could do different options. You could do it based, you would store it one way in the database, but when you show it to the user, you would show it in the way that makes them happy.
Okay.
So in this case here, I'll just insist that it's done this way. But I would want to store it in the database in a standard date format, show it to the user in their language, and let them use their calendar.
And I'm sure asp.net actually has things that allow us to kind of identify where the user is so we can actually show them the appropriate format.
Exactly. So you can figure out the user's language, the user's locale. You can present dates and money to them in that way. You can also switch from left to right to left, as you like. Here we're going to say apply format in edit mode as well. And let's go and then recompile this and see what it looks like. And maybe it'll make a difference. Do I need to run it again? Okay. So we'll run this, hit /movies. This is really interesting. It changed the date exactly as we wanted it to, but I only had to say that in one place. I didn't even have to say it on this page. I said it on the model itself. It's like I put a Postit note.
And say, this is what's happening.
For that model, for that release date. And then if we go back over here and we say display release date, it figured it out. This helper here said display release date, and it did the right thing. And that makes things a lot nicer for me. The question then is, does it go all the way? I don't know. See? No matter how I pass the data, it is always going to be this way.
Going to return it in the, okay. Mm-hmm. And this is how it would be saved.
So this is another interesting point. Because it's a date time, it will always be saved as a date time. You never want to store the string that the user gave exactly that way. You want to have Entity Framework do it. Entity Framework knows how to think about dates. SQL Server or MySQL, the database knows how to think about dates.
Okay.
Okay. Cool. Another thing worth pointing out is just how clean the relationship is between the controller, the view, and the model. So let's just look at details again very briefly. We say details, we pass in an ID. Here's what the URL looks like. And we are getting back a movie, and we pass it into this view. So we know that there must be a details view. We open up the details view, and there at the top is that strongly typed movie. So down here, I've got IntelliSense.
Yeah, and it gives you a whole bunch of options.
Right. So if I misspelled that, I would know about that, right? I'm not just saying quote genre and then hoping that it'll work. All right. Cool. So that is a pretty complete example, in fact. And in this case, it created the database for us. In the more intermediate version of ASP.NET Core, we're going to talk about how Entity Framework works in detail.
Okay.
This is a pretty basic thing. It's one table.
It's one table. Where can we see that table?
So where can we see that table? I would have to go and see if I can look at it into my Server Explorer. You're going to challenge me to find my data connection. How do you look at local DB? I don't remember how to do this. Let's find out. That database connection, and actually I believe local DB is a good question that you've asked. Server Explorer. There is a specific way, there it is, local DB in the server name, to say that server name. I think that this is a certain version. Let's see, take a look here. This is my local database server name, if I remember correctly. And what I could probably do to save time is go over here to get the, where did we say that was? App settings?
Thanks, yeah.
Crazy auto-generated name. I'll put that into Notepad. And let's try that again. I actually haven't thought to do that in a while, so it's good that you brought it up.
Because I'm pretty sure if we restart this application, would all the data that we've created disappear?
It'll definitely stay away. It'll definitely stay there. We're not going to lose any data, I promise that. But for development purposes, you usually end up tossing that data often, and you have a test harness that will go and create that. So put in local DB. Oh, you can also view local DB database names with View, SQL Server Object Explorer.
Right there at the top.
Ah, there it is.
And we just matched it out to the name.
Yeah, there we go. What I was doing was too complicated. There it is.
Okay, so that's it.
And look, there's your columns.
And there's movie.
Yep, it's good that you brought that up.
So I could actually manually add stuff in here.
Sure, if you wanted to.
And it will show up.
Another way that people will do things is they will write tests, and in the test, they will drop the database completely, recreate it from scratch, and then load it from a JSON file or an XML. So you could go and find test data online, put it in a temporary file, run a test, and that would populate your database and get you started.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So that is a real, small, but real application that does CRUD, create, read, update, and delete, using ASP.NET Core.